And bad morning, everybody. Today is October 18, 2018. Thanks for joining us on Bad Morning News, episode 64 today. I'll start with a couple of housekeeping notes. Thank you to Brave Browser for sponsoring the show. If you're tired of the typical big corporations out there selling your data to the highest bidder, check out Brave Browser. If you go to brave.com/bad944, you can download the browser there and it will benefit the show. So thanks to anyone considering doing that. And another note, we're looking for more hosts for Bad Morning News. If you're interested in this morning slot or potentially an afternoon slot, let us know. Give us a shout out in the Discord or in the comments of this video. Just to note that we're looking for new hosts for the show. Alright, well, I guess we'll get right into it today. First article is from activistpost.com, written by Aaron Kiesel. Security robots invade NYC and an education droid speaks at UK Parliament. Security robots have invaded NYC and are now patrolling the streets, while diplomatic robots are roaming around UK Parliament floors. Robots are becoming more prevalent and relevant in society, and like it or not, the androids are here to stay. This technology will only exponentially increase as time passes, as Boston Dynamics has showcased over the years. Now, thanks to that little idea of creating robotic cretins, there are security cyborgs patrolling in the tri-state area. These robots use 5 cameras, including one that is thermal vision, to observe their surroundings, and CBS reports they can even talk back to you. A creepy, scary fact. The robots are able to scan anyone walking on the sidewalks, record license plates, use infrared vision, and one of the scariest uses of this technology is the capability to detect cell phone serial numbers within a designated patrolling area. According to CBS, the devices are actively being used and can be seen in 16 states, including New York, at the Lifrak City Apartments in Queens and LaGuardia Airport. Recent happenings have residents in a panic over privacy concerns, and they're rightfully alarmed. Once again, the company responsible, Nightscope, says the data is secured and is only seen by the security agency controlling the robot. But perhaps that's the most frightening part, not knowing who has control of your data, including cell phone IMEI. This robot rollout is daunting to say the least. It was only a few years ago when people argued against the use of drone cameras due to privacy violations. Now we have surveillance drones roaming the streets of certain properties. My, how times have changed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pond in the UK, a robot was seen on the floor of UK Parliament. MPs on the Education Committee invited a robot named Pepper to Parliament for a committee hearing on artificial intelligence and the Fourth Industrial Revolution for a long discussion about the future of human and robot relations. When Pepper was asked where humanity stands in a world run by AI, Pepper responded, "Robots will have an important role to play, but we will always need the soft skills that are unique to humans to sense, make, and drive value from technology." That is, of course, until robots take over our jobs. Pepper, as Activist Post, has been sounding the alarm of the coming robot apocalypse. This is the start of the Terminator movie, as even scientists agree that machines will begin to think for themselves in the near future and could be a threat to the human race. One such famous scientist, Stephen Hawking, previously warned that artificial intelligence could spell the end for the human race if we are not careful enough because they are too clever. Even if robots don't overtake the human race, they will at least take over our jobs. Activist Post has continued to report about new developments like construction and farming robots, Angus and HRP5P, being created to replace workers in the aforementioned industries. In May, Activist Post reported that University College, London Hospitals, and the Alan Turing Institute aim to bring game changing benefits of artificial intelligence to NHS patients and replace some workers in the hospital. Recently, Activist Post also reported that even finance wasn't safe from the robot apocalypse. China Construction Bank opened a Shanghai branch run entirely by robots in a testing phase for finance with little to no human involvement. Robots are beginning to take over every aspect of society. They are also headed for retail businesses delivering freight and eliminating truckers. Now we can add security bots to the mix and allowing robots to police the rule of law or at least help law enforcement as an aid. All of this is a threat to set a further dangerous precedent. We appear to be stepping full force into an increasingly robot driven world without understanding the ramifications of what our future consequences will be. And that's the end of that article. Um, to summarize it, there's a new patrolling robot in New York City. Apparently, a certain apartment complex has one just patrolling its property at least, and it's able to read the cell phone's serial numbers within a certain area, as well as talk back to people apparently. And also, UK Parliament invited a robot to give a speech for some reason. I don't know exactly what that has to do with education. I guess potentially, if they want the robots to take over teaching kids as well. I'm not sure how that might end up working. But yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting subject. I've followed it for a while, and I don't know exactly what to think. I mean, you definitely have people on one side who make it out to be really apocalyptic and thinking that we'll probably become pets of robots at some point. And you have other people who are just saying, oh, it's all fine. It's all going to be fine. We'll just have different jobs, even if robots take over a lot of jobs that are currently done by people. And, a lot of certain people think it just won't be a big deal and that it's a good thing. And obviously, there's people who support transhumanism and want to incorporate robot parts into themselves in order to potentially live longer or improve certain aspects about themselves, I guess. I don't know exactly where I fall. I think it is concerning overall to me. But I might just be a Luddite in some senses. I've never taken that well to a lot of technology. Even with what we have now, I think a lot of it has kind of gone overboard. So I'm not really welcoming to the robot future in that sense, and it'll be interesting to see how long it does take for a lot of industries to become populated with robots. The article mentioned truck drivers. I know a few truck drivers, and I spoke to one of them once about what they think about the idea of driverless trucks and all of that. And he thinks it'll still be, several years down the road. Some people say it could happen, within a few years, that people won't be needing to drive trucks, at least semi trucks. But my friend told me that there's a lot involved with loading and unloading right now as well that a robot wouldn't necessarily be able to do. So who knows? I don't know what'll happen with that. I've heard some bizarre things with robots being introduced to take over jobs like editing. So even, not physical type jobs, even intellectual things where people come up with, currently people come up with, different ways of wording things and writing articles, and apparently there's also intelligence that can do that as well, and certain companies are looking to roll that out, it seems. But I personally don't like the idea of all of this robotic technology. I just don't think it can ever be as good as um, human intelligence. Maybe that's just a moralistic approach or whatever, but that's just my opinion on it. Let me know what you guys think about our impending robot overlords. Danielle says, bad morning. Bad morning to Danielle and to everyone else. Danielle says, sounds nuts to me. Daniel says, robots talking back. Don't take any snark from some lump of soulless metal. I agree. Danielle says, figure they will be used to spy on us. Yeah, and that's what's scary. I mean, to have an object that has no, human empathy, that's just completely, beholden to its programming and has no qualms about surveillance or invading people's privacy in the same way that a human might have, even those who are sworn to be the arms for the state, as we currently still have human police and whatnot. Even they have moments where they make decisions and can choose whether or not to impose certain laws or not. And I guess potentially in a world where robots would take that over, there would be no room for escape at all. Daniel says, well, your laptops and phones spy on you now, so that's probably a given. Exactly right. Okay, moving on to the next article this morning. This is from Reason.com. And we have another article from Robbie Suave, who follows a lot of the U.S. campus culture type news. So he's really good for articles like this. High school girls admitted to making false sexual assault accusations against a male student because they just don't like him. Lawyer says his client was basically being tortured in school by the other students. Seneca Valley School District in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is facing a lawsuit from a former male student who was forced out of school and investigated for sexual assault due to a series of false accusations made by female students. The girls, dubbed Mean Girls in the lawsuit, a reference to the 2004 Lindsay Lohan film, admitted on tape that they made up the assault story. One said, I just don't like him, and I would do anything to get him expelled, according to the Toronto Sun. The false allegations were life derailing for the accused, who is referred to as TF in the lawsuit. On October 3rd, 2017, one of the girls told other students that TF had sexually assaulted her at a pool. A Seneca Valley guidance counselor overheard the accusation and reported it to Childline, the state's child abuse prevention agency, as required by law. TF was swiftly charged with indecent assault and harassment and received 6 months of probation as part of a plea deal. Months later, in March of 2018, TF was again falsely accused. According to the lawsuit, another girl invited him over to a house party. A few days later, she told the school guidance counselor that TF had broken into her home and sexually assaulted her. The lawsuit claims she was coached by TF's first accuser. As a result of this accusation, TF was charged with assault and criminal trespassing. He was removed from school in leg and wrist shackles and spent 9 days in juvenile detention. The lawsuit elaborates on a number of other indignities TF suffered. He was released on house arrest on April 18, 2018, with an ankle monitor and specific instructions from juvenile probation officer Michael Trago that he could not tell people about the ankle device, and he could not wear shorts or other clothing that revealed the ankle device, even though it was during some of the hottest days of summer. He was not permitted to have any visitors, phone, or internet access, and he could not leave the house except for therapy, which he requires to deal with the psychological trauma he suffered, and to attend church. After 28 days, he was allowed outside the house only to mow his lawn, which he had to do in long pants, regardless of the temperature. He was unable to play during most of the high school baseball season and was told by the athletic director that she was not sure he could play baseball because every time he was wearing a Seneca Valley jersey, he was representing the school. TF was unable to play baseball or work at his summer jobs for part of the summer. By the end of the summer, the conspiracy against TF was unmasked. Other students came forward with Snapchat messages that contradicted the claims of the Mean Girls, who eventually admitted to lying. All charges against TF were dropped, but TF's family is understandably distraught that the girls have suffered no consequences. Neither the police nor the school district have taken any action against them, according to the lawsuit, and so the family is pursuing legal action against the girls' parents, the school district, and the district attorney. TF's attorney, Craig Fishman, did not respond to a request for comment, but he told Penn Live that his client was basically being tortured in school by the other students and investigators, but the administration was only focused on protecting the girls who were lying. In a statement, a spokesperson for the school district said privacy laws prevented officials from commenting on specific details of the lawsuit, but that they believe it is without merit. We have followed all applicable laws, and we will vigorously defend ourselves throughout the process, the statement read. On Monday, school board president Jim Nichols said that there is quite a bit of misinformation and misperception out there. Just because something is contained in a lawsuit complaint does not mean that it's fact, he said. From the school's perspective, it had no choice but to involve Childline when it learned about a possible sexual assault, and school officials can't punish any of the female students for their bad behavior outside of school. These are valid points, and it may very well be that the school did everything it was required to do. I'm making note of this case because of the national conversation we seem to be having about the existence of false sexual assault accusations in the wake of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. False accusations may not be common, but they do happen. To pretend otherwise, as fourth wave feminism's believe all victims mantra demands, is to ignore a large number of cases involving young people, often young black men, wrongly accused of sexual misconduct. And that's the end of that article. Apparently, another case of people using accusations of sexual assault to harm someone. This isn't the first time, and unfortunately, probably not the last time this happens, especially in the climate where, according to many leftists, you're required to uncritically believe every accusation, and as well to completely throw everyone under the bus just based on accusation alone, and not even bother with due process. And it does really remind me of Mean Girls, of the movie, if any of you've seen that, where basically it just showcases some somewhat sociopathic students who are willing to say whatever they need to say to bring people down, and that's what seems to have happened in this case. And I think that's what's lost on the advocates who claim that no one would ever lie about being raped. Well, there are sociopaths out there who just don't care. Obviously, there are people who would use such an accusation just to benefit themselves, and would not care about the consequences to the person accused. And as the article says, even if that's rare, it happens, and you can't, if you believe in liberty in any sense, if you believe in any decent, society where people don't get locked up for things that they didn't do, you have to follow the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And I think it's really sad that there's so many people advocating against such a simple principle at this point in time. Uh, Even just, maybe 10, 15 years ago when I first got into politics, I thought that the left was on the side of reducing the number of people in prisons and all of that, but really, if they're supporting, throwing people in jail over with no evidence, then they're really doing the exact opposite of reducing mass incarceration. It really makes no sense at all. I'll try to hit up some comments here. Danielle says microwave ovens and TVs too. Exactly. That's an example of technology I find just completely jumping the shark. That we now have refrigerators, and microwaves and stoves with intelligent technology and the ability to potentially listen or even record video of things going on in your home. Max Ogburn says, I'm with you, Cryptic. Tech now has already removed too much of the human element. Definitely. Thanks for being here, Max. Danielle says, the girls definitely need to suffer consequences. I believe false accusations are far more common than admitted. Yeah, it's ironic that now the school is saying, "Oh, we can't punish them for what they're doing outside of school." Well, uh, I mean that may be true, but I don't know. I think when I was in high school, I think there was a policy about lying. Maybe that only applied to lying about teachers or something. I don't know, but um, yeah, I thought it was a crime to make false police reports. So, but then I guess in this case it doesn't say if any of the false complainants made a police report, or if they just had the school administrators overhearing them and calling this helpline. So it may be that this whole case is caught in loopholes where if the girls didn't actually make their own statement to the police, maybe they're not technically guilty of making, false accusation in that sense. So hopefully the young man's lawyers can get some recourse for him, hopefully, because I do feel for him. And as it said, it's a big impact of someone's life, and you never know. I mean, there could have been a vigilante out there who wanted to kill the guy based on the allegations, and then who would be at fault? If this kid got killed by someone who hashtag believes all victims. And again, I just to reiterate, I don't have a problem with being receptive to someone who says something happened, but there's a difference between being willing to listen to someone and having evidence and applying due process. So I will move on to another article. This one suggested by Lupinit, our good friend, who believes that the midterm election is one to watch with popcorn. And this first article deals with Senator Claire McCaskill's attempt to hold on to her seat. And this article is from Vox.com, written by Ella Nilsson. Missouri's chaotic, contentious Senate race explained. Missouri's Claire McCaskill might be 2018's most vulnerable Senate Democrat. Senator McCaskill is facing an extremely tough election in 2018. The Missouri senator is considered the most embattled Democrat incumbent facing re-election in 2018. She's near or at the top of nearly every list of toughest Senate races. A Democrat in an increasingly red state, McCaskill has survived the past two cycles in 2006 and 2012 with nothing short of political jiu-jitsu. It's going to be a squeaker in my view, said Adrienne Marsh, McCaskill's campaign manager in 2012 and her communications director in 2006. The dynamics, they're tough. Missouri voted for Trump by nearly 20 points in 2016, and McCaskill needs to peel off some of those Trump voters to hang on to her Senate seat. Her challenger will likely be the state's 38-year-old Attorney General Josh Hawley, the current frontrunner in the Republican primary on Tuesday. At the same time, McCaskill is struggling to hang on to her Democratic base, particularly black voters. But for months, Hawley also had a problem. Missouri's former Republican governor Eric Greitens was accused of coercing his hairdresser into non-consensual sex acts and taking nude photos of her as blackmail, according to an explosive report from state lawmakers released in April. Hawley and other Republicans wanted Greitens gone. For months, the governor refused to budge, insisting he had a consensual extramarital affair and calling the investigation and report into his conduct a political witch hunt. The state legislature considered whether to impeach him, and Hawley went public with evidence alleging Greitens may have committed a felony of a separate investigation into a veterans charity the governor ran unrelated to the sex scandal. Greitens eventually resigned at the end of May. The disgraced former governor is no longer a drag on Hawley's Senate campaign, but it's still going to be tight. It'll be a tough but not impossible race for McCaskill. To say Missouri is a solidly Republican state would be missing the point. It is a fiercely independent political landscape that McCaskill, a fiercely independent Democrat, has navigated skillfully for the past 2 decades. Missouri state politics is not about sheer partisanship, it's about, do you make your case? Do they think you're an honorable person? Longtime Missouri Democratic operative Roy Temple told me. As McCaskill tries to court Trump voters and bring her base back into the fold, the 2018 midterms could be the toughest balancing act she has ever performed. For years, McCaskill has embodied Missouri's independent ethos, dab in the middle between a Democrat and Republican, according to Marsh. Even so, McCaskill has mostly stuck with her party in Washington this year. She was part of a group of red state Democrats who voted against the GOP's massive tax cuts last year, upset with the lack of Republican outreach to conservative Democrats on the bill. McCaskill also voted against the repeal of Obamacare and has called for gun control measures to be implemented after the shooting in Parkland. She has an F rating from the NRA. What voters want is Claire McCaskill as a Republican. Marsh said she's not a Republican, but she operates above party politics. On the campaign trail, McCaskill has tailored her message to highlight her record of working with Republicans and to make sure Missouri voters don't see her as too liberal, adopting some Trump-like language along the way. For instance, after violent clashes over Confederate statues in Charlottesville, Virginia, last summer, McCaskill told reporters she thought individual states and communities should decide whether to take down statues, saying they served a purpose, reminding Americans of the ugly past chapters of the country's history so that it was not repeated. To win this year, McCaskill is trying to pick up moderates, spending lots of time courting Trump voters in rural areas. On the stump, she's highlighting votes she cast in support of some GOP and Trump policies. My job isn't to fight the president, my job is to fight for you, she told voters last summer. Last month, McCaskill made headlines for criticizing Hillary Clinton after the former presidential candidate said she won in parts of America that were optimistic, diverse, dynamic moving forward, and implying the places she did not win were the opposite. McCaskill also said she sympathized with Missouri voters who cast ballots for Trump in an interview with MSNBC's Casey Hunt. For those of us that are in states that Trump won, we would really appreciate it if she would be more careful and show respect to every American voter and not just the ones who voted for her, McCaskill said. As McCaskill spends time persuading white moderates to vote for her, there are signs of a possible left wing revolt building, especially among Missouri's urban African American communities. The Black Lives Matter movement, which was born in Ferguson, Missouri after the police shooting of Michael Brown, is experiencing a nationwide resurgence after recent police shootings of unarmed black men in Sacramento, California, and Brooklyn. An empowered and energized progressive base is criticizing McCaskill for not showing up in the communities. McCaskill desperately needs black voters to turn out to win. If you're going to win in Missouri as a Democrat, you're going to have to get the black and brown vote. Representative Emanuel Cleaver, D. Missouri, said, adding that he's optimistic McCaskill can mend fences with the community. I think she'll rise to the occasion and do what needs to be done. A few months ago, the discontent from some African American voters have been feeling toward McCaskill bubbled over into public view at a town hall with Representative Bruce Franks Jr., a Democrat from St. Louis. Franks has been calling for McCaskill to spend more time in Missouri's black communities, though he said he'll vote for her in November. He issued a warning: I'm going to vote for Claire, but Claire is going to have to bring her ass to St. Louis. This speaks to the left's larger frustration with moderate Democrats who they feel don't represent their best interest. That has some strategists worried that voters who don't have a progressive Democrat to vote for may just not vote for Democrats at all, letting a Republican win. Missouri is an interesting place. It's really a place where you have to show me. Congressman Cleaver said, nodding to the state's nickname. It's the state motto, but politics is real. I think people want to see her. Cleaver, a vocal McCaskill supporter, believes that problem is easily fixable, but he and Marsh say this shift isn't necessarily Missouri Democratic voters moving more to the left. Rather, it's that Missouri's Democratic activists are more energized and emboldened in 2018 than they have been in years, along with the party's base in much of the rest of the country. I wouldn't say they're moving left. I feel they're more motivated, Marsh told me. She also pushed back against the idea that McCaskill hasn't shown up for black voters. No one in Missouri politics has fought harder for the African American community than Claire McCaskill, referencing her stance on criminal justice reform and mass incarceration, especially following Ferguson. If you talk to the old guard, they'll tell you the same. She's always been a huge supporter and has stuck her neck out there at times when it's been most difficult. And McCaskill herself has promised black voters she'll fight for them in Washington and vowed to spend millions and millions of campaign dollars seeking their vote in November. And I will stop there with the article. So basically, it's really interesting when you come to these states, a lot of these so-called flyover states that aren't clearly in the bag for one party or another, like obviously the West Coast and the New England areas, as well as other states that have been solidly red. Missouri has kind of been purple, and I can relate. I can relate to just the landscape coming from Wisconsin originally, which is also somewhat of a purplish type state, and has had a lot of different people over the years from both parties. And yeah, I mean it's a delicate balance that they strike. Obviously, this article is from Vox, so of course their perspective is to promote the idea of politicking as being responsible. Obviously, I don't find it really a good thing in that sense. As someone said that when both parties are working together, that's actually because they're putting over an extra bad thing on the American people. Um, to that something to that effect. I think it was said by George Carlin. But yeah, I mean, I don't find bipartisanship necessarily good in that sense, but it does make for interesting races. In this sense, because they're forced to be different than a completely, uh, you know, a blue state type senator or a total red state senator, where they have this patchwork of different uh, things that they think will put them over the top. But in the end, I mean, that's a pretty bizarre balance trying to court Trump voters and Black Lives Matter activists. I guess she needs Kanye West. I guess that's what she needs at this point because apparently he's both supporting of Black Lives Matter and Donald Trump. So I guess she needs to call him and ask what his secret is to balancing this whole thing. But I agree with Lupin it that it is fun to watch these at times, um, and it could be an indication for what will happen. When a purple state is kind of balancing on the edge of going one way or another. I guess a lot of the Democrats have been claiming that with Trump nominating Kavanaugh, that there's going to be a surge of Democratic voters next month. I don't necessarily think it'll be quite that dramatic, but states like Missouri could be a good indicator to see if that follows through or not. So it's one to watch. Definitely one to watch there. All right. Daniel says libel and slander are crimes. They must face judgment. Danielle says yes, the parents can file a civil suit against them at least. Daniel says so she's happy to have them fall if the people want it, despite being aspects of history. Shaking my head. Bipartisanship is politis slang for both sides agreeing to screw you. Yeah, exactly. So again, she might have a bridge between Republicans and Democrats, but where is she on ending the military-industrial complex? Nowhere. As is the case with anyone who's entrenched in traditional politics, whether they're Democratic, Republican, so-called independent, or whatever. It all ends the same place, which is the continuance of the system as it is, which really does nothing for the most major issues that I think many of you will agree with me on, which are things that are not touched by either party, whether it's deficit spending or militarism, imperialism, and the endless climbing of the uh, deficit spending on military weapons and whatnot, and handing it over to Northrop Grumman, Boeing, etc. But there's a little more to this article, talking more about whatever allegations against that governor of Missouri. But I'll let you guys check that out later. For now, we'll move on to this article from, let's see. Right, this article is from Free Thought Project. Doctor sentenced to die in prison for healing people with weed as child predator congressman let out early. A caring father and doctor who healed people will die in prison because he used a plant. In the meantime, child sexting Anthony Weiner gets out early. This is written by Matt Agarist. Free Thought Project first reported on the story of Dr. Gordon Pilland III in March of 2017. He was arrested after a school social worker reported that he was giving cannabis-infused goat milk to his autistic son. When conducting a follow-up search of Pilland's home, police found marijuana plants growing in the backyard, 2 bottles of decades-old prescription pills, and a small bag of poppy seeds, which was a gift from a horticulturist. Pilland had one last thread of hope as his case moved through an appeals court in North Carolina. Sadly, however, we live in a country that gives doctors who heal people with a plant more prison time than child predator congressmen. On Tuesday, the appeals court upheld Pilland's conviction, and this doctor, who is now 70, will likely die behind bars over a plant. In an interview with the Free Thought Project, Pilland's daughter, Lucy Snow, claimed that the prosecution used the fact that Pilland was in possession of his deceased parents' prescriptions and his property's proximity to an unmarked daycare as an impetus to charge him with trafficking heroin. As a result, Pilland was sentenced to 18 to 24 years in prison and a $500,000 fine. As we previously reported, Monroe Gordon Pilland III has lived an amazing life according to some estimates. In the late 1960s and early 70s, Pilland served as a naval officer during the Vietnam War. Upon his return to the States, he earned a degree in nutrition from the University of California, Berkeley, and later a medical degree from the prestigious Wake Forest University, formerly a Southern Baptist University. He completed his medical residency in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and was a board-certified medical doctor from 1979 to 1984. While Pilland has managed to keep his love for cannabis under the radar since the 80s, he was going through a tenuous custody battle over his autistic son. His son's mother was not a cannabis advocate, yet Pilland would offer his son goat's milk infused with cannabis as treatment for his behavioral and cognitive deficits. When the school's social worker discovered this fact, she sent police to his home to investigate. As the Free Thought Project has reported, many parents, including some politicians, are now giving their children cannabis for autism with astounding results. That home visit led to the medical doctor's arrest and conviction in March of 2017. At trial, Pilland didn't stand a chance. Snow said her dad's first mistake was to represent himself in court and take on Assistant District Attorney Alex Bass head on. He was super content to go to court to share his knowledge of medical cannabis and let the chips fall where they may, Snow said, but unfortunately he couldn't find a lawyer that wasn't intimidated by Bass's trumped-up charges and that was willing to fight for him, so he resorted to representing himself, which had disastrous consequences. Snow said that instead of charging Pilland with possession of marijuana, a misdemeanor in North Carolina, Bass decided to charge him with trafficking heroin. Here is what Snow said was found by police when they searched Pilland's home. A 2009 half-full bottle of Percocet oxycodone in my grandmother Lillian Pilland's name that my dad had failed to dispose of, recycle properly. A single full bottle of Duramorph belonging to my grandfather, but this wasn't a charge or used in court as the bottle was full. A few poppy seeds were gifted from my uncle, my mom's brother, who is a landscape architect and gardener. According to Snow, Bass used the Percocet belonging to Pilland's deceased mother and the fact that a home daycare was located nearby to throw the full weight of the law against her father. She said the fact that he was in possession of several pounds of marijuana was never presented in court, making the cannabis activist seem like a heroin dealer and not the curative shaman that he was. I don't know why my dad kept the old pills, but he tended to be kind of a pack rat or just not be bothered by little things. Snow said, noting that one of the key pieces of evidence used against her father was something he didn't realize he had. Dad says he didn't even remember having them as they were found in the back of a drawer. Snow said Dr. Paland was naive when he went to trial, thinking that if he just told the truth about cannabis activism, no jury would convict him. After the search and seizure of his house, I think my dad really thought he had a chance to lay his life's passion and work all out there. I think similar to, say, Caitlyn Jenner, somewhere inside he just didn't want to hide anymore. Knowing what he knows and being the ripe age of 70, he was super content to go to court to share his knowledge of medical cannabis and let the chips fall where they may. After the prosecution presented its case, and without his own legal representation, the jury took less than 30 minutes to convict Dr. Paland of trafficking heroin, presumably due in part to his possession of 58 grams of poppy seeds. Here's about what twice that amount looks like, and they have a picture of a pretty small bag of seeds. Snow told the Free Thought Project that she wishes her father had been given a plea deal, but said the prosecutor knew he could easily get a conviction due to the fact that the senior citizen was choosing to represent himself. As a result, the physician's daughter now views her father's conviction with disdain and especially resents ADA Bass, who says she lied about her father and mischaracterized him. DA Bass stated my dad had a large cache of dangerous and highly addictive opioid drugs for sale and distribution, and he knows this is a lie. The truth is, only a single, nearly decade-old forgotten pharmaceutical bottle belonging to my deceased grandmother and the happenstance of living near an unmarked daycare was used as evidence for sending my nonviolent father to prison for life. The teacher and daughter of a marijuana activist now accuses prosecutor Bass of sending an innocent man to prison and says he knew full well Paland was no heroin trafficker. Bass's decisions were not only immoral but go against many standards that prosecutors are sworn to uphold. Snow said he knows good and well, without a doubt, as does anyone who looks at the evidence, that opium or heroin selling, trafficking, or usage was not occurring. Snow said the punishment does not fit the crime, and she pointed to other cases where people were convicted of trafficking heroin but received much softer sentences. Paland's life story might have been written differently had he resided in a state other than North Carolina. To date, more than half the nation has legalized medical marijuana in some form. In fact, in some of those other states, Paland may very well have been able to serve as a certifying doctor for medical marijuana, given the fact that he once held board certification as a practicing MD. But he chose to live in the state he loved and now has to pay a heavy price for dabbling in marijuana. Looking at the bigger picture, Paland's case may serve as an indictment of a justice system and pharmaceutical industry that will go to great lengths to ensure the truth about cannabis is never told. After all, Paland is a medical doctor who gave up his practice to pursue a lifetime of research into cannabis. Unfortunately, anyone who may want to glean from him what he knows will have to visit him in the Marion, North Carolina Correctional Institute. That's the end of that article. Again, another pretty depressing story of a guy who seems to only have had good intentions and, was caught with poppy seeds and some old prescriptions, and they decided to throw the book at him and, basically make it out to be like he was selling heroin to, like, 5-year-olds in the daycare or something. I don't know, but frankly, I wouldn't care even if he was over there shooting up heroin and selling heroin. I mean, as long as he didn't put a gun to anyone's head and force them to purchase it, in my book, he didn't do anything wrong at all. And, even if he was taking the old oxycodone or whatever, I mean, that's no one's business. And but yeah, unfortunately, he may die in prison now over all of that. And just another sad case of how you just can't trust people. You know, there's always people watching and willing to rat you out to the so-called authorities. In this case, he was in a custody dispute, and you know, that may have given incentive to his ex or whoever to turn him in, and he seemed to have more faith in the people around him and in the justice system as it is, where he thought if he just was honest and tried to lay out his intentions, that he wouldn't be punished or convicted in that way. But he was, and it's ironic that apparently the DA didn't even bring up the cannabis itself. So he was just really screwed in that case. And this brings up one thing that I'd like to mention, which is jury nullification, which is the idea of juries, people on juries having the power to say, you know, we don't want to punish this person for this crime. And I've seen there's a lot of talk about that in some libertarianish and anarchist circles, where if you have the opportunity to be called to a jury, you may have the ability to be a hero to somebody who's a nonviolent, you know, so-called criminal. You can be the one to stand up and say, you know, I don't want this guy to be thrown in jail over this bullshit, and that would be all it takes to, you know, create a mistrial, and that wouldn't be the complete end of it. The state could still refile, but it's not a bad idea. Um, and unfortunately, you know, if jurors aren't willing to be independent and to look at things that way, then, you know, if they just strictly follow the law and say, well, yeah, he had poppy seeds, he had this and that, and convict him. You know, if they're not willing to take a step back and you know, take into account the fact that he is nonviolent and really didn't hurt anyone. You know, people like this doctor might have been spared, but I think, unfortunately, there's still too many people out there who are willing to just do what they're told. If they're on a jury, they'll just go ahead and follow the instructions as they are. Right. Danielle says, sounds like another opportunity for the president to commute a sentence. Yeah, that would be great. Um, he's already pardoned a couple people at the urging of Kim Kardashian, no less, apparently. So hopefully, yeah, I definitely hope the best and hope there is some hope for this guy, because it's pretty depressing to hear stories like that. All right, I'll touch on another story related to the election. This one is just somewhat interesting, given the um, actually, now I'm going to read this article published a couple days ago. This one is from BuzzFeed, so, you know, BuzzFeed, usually I find most of their stuff to be crap, but this one is pretty informative. BuzzFeedNews.com, written by Aram Rostin. A Middle East monarchy hired American ex-soldiers to kill its political enemies. This could be the future of war. Cradling an AK-47 and sucking a lollipop, the former American Green Beret bumped along in the back of an armored SUV as it wound through the darkened streets of Aden. Two other commandos on the mission were former Navy SEALs. As elite U.S. Special Operations fighters, they had years of specialized training by the U.S. military to protect America, but now they were working for a different master, a private U.S. company that had been hired by the United Arab Emirates, a tiny desert monarchy on the Persian Gulf. On that night, December 29, 2015, their job was to carry out an assassination. Their armed attack, described to BuzzFeed News by two of its participants and corroborated by drone surveillance footage, was the first operation in a startling for profit venture. For months in war torn Yemen, some of America's most highly trained soldiers worked on a mercenary mission of murky legality to kill prominent clerics and Islamist political figures. Their target that night, Ansaf Ali Mayo, the local leader of the Islamist political considers al-Islah to be the Yemeni branch of the worldwide Muslim Brotherhood, which the UAE calls a terrorist organization. Many experts insist that al-Islah, one of whose members won the Nobel Peace Prize, is no terror group. They say it's a legitimate political party that threatens the UAE, not through violence, but by speaking out against its ambitions in Yemen. The mercenaries' plan was to attach a bomb laced with shrapnel to the door of al-Islah's headquarters, located near a soccer stadium in central Aden, a key Yemeni port city. The explosion, one of the leaders of the expedition explained, was supposed to kill everybody in that office. When they arrived at 9:57 p.m., all seemed quiet. The men crept out of the SUV, guns at the ready. One carried the explosive charge toward the building, but just as he was about to reach the door, another member of the team opened fire, shooting back along the dimly lit street, and their carefully designed plan went haywire. The operation against Mayo, which was reported at the time but until now was not known to have been carried out by American mercenaries, marked a pivot point in the war in Yemen, a brutal conflict that has seen children starved, villages bombed, and epidemics of cholera roll through the civilian population. The bombing was the first salvo in a string of unsolved assassinations that killed more than 2 dozen of the group's leaders. The company that hired the soldiers and carried out the attack is Spear Operations Group, incorporated in Delaware and founded by Abraham Golan, a charismatic Hungarian-Israeli security contractor who lives outside of Pittsburgh. He led the team's strike against Mayo. There was a targeted assassination program in Yemen, he told BuzzFeed. I was running it, we did it, it was sanctioned by the UAE within the coalition. The UAE and Saudi Arabia lead an alliance of 9 countries in Yemen, fighting what is largely a proxy war against Iran. The US is helping the Saudi UAE side by providing weapons, intelligence, and other support. The press office of the UAE's embassy, as well as its US public affairs company, Harbor Group, did not respond to multiple calls and emails. The revelations that a Middle East monarchy hired Americans to carry out assassinations comes at a moment when the world is focused on the alleged murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi Arabia, an autocratic regime that has close ties to both the US and the UAE. Golan said that during his company's months-long engagement in Yemen, his team was responsible for a number of the war's high-profile assassinations, though he declined to specify which ones. He argued that the US needs an assassination program similar to the model he deployed. I just want there to be a debate, he said. Maybe I'm a monster. Maybe I should be in jail. Maybe I'm a bad guy, but I'm right. Spear Operations Group's private assassination mission marks the confluence of 3 developments transforming the way war is conducted worldwide. Modern counterterrorism combat has shifted away from traditional military objectives, such as destroying airfields, gun emplacements, or barracks, to killing specific individuals, largely reshaping war into organized assassinations. War has become increasingly privatized, with many nations outsourcing most military support services to private contractors, leaving frontline combat as virtually the only function that the US and many other militaries have not contracted out to for profit ventures. The long US wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have relied heavily on elite special forces, producing tens of thousands of highly trained American commandos who can demand high private sector salaries for defense contracting or outright mercenary work. With Spear Operation Group's mission in Yemen, these trends converged into a new incendiary business: militarized contract killing carried out by skilled American fighters. Experts said it is almost inconceivable that the United States would not have known that the UAE, whose military the U.S. has trained and armed at virtually every level, had hired an American company staffed by American veterans to conduct an assassination program in a war it closely monitors. One of the mercenaries, according to 3 sources familiar with the operation, used to work with the CIA's ground branch, the agency's equivalent of the military's special forces. Another was a special forces sergeant in the Maryland Army National Guard, and yet another, according to 4 people who knew him, was still in the Navy Reserve as a SEAL and had a top secret clearance. He was a veteran of SEAL Team 6, or DevGru, the sources told BuzzFeed News. The New York Times once described that elite unit, famous for killing Osama bin Laden, as a global man-hunting machine with limited outside oversight. And there's some more to this article. It's really pretty in-depth and interesting, so I highly recommend it. And I'll drop it in Discord and in the comments in a few minutes here. But I highly recommend reading that. But yeah, I mean, it's, as it said, this has been a growing trend with having these guys who go through U.S. military training in special forces, and then they leave because they can get paid a lot more by these private contractors. And so now, they're out just assassinating people for the UAE, apparently, which is really disturbing. And again, goes to, your tax dollars are going to train these people to become assassins, and now they're just profiting off of it. And yeah, there should be a dialogue about, what's happening, although I think, there's not too much that can be done. I mean, a good first start would be to obviously tone down the spending on all of this military training, but as we know, that's probably not likely in the current time. So unfortunately, this will probably continue to happen because as individuals, they can sign up with whoever they want to, I guess, and the military will just pretend that they don't know anything about it, even though they likely do know that that's going on. So just I don't know. I really don't know. It's just a really bizarre world we live in now, and I really wish I knew what to say about it, but it's really pretty sobering. And I'll hit up some comments here. Max says jurors are never informed of nullification. That's true. I don't think it's definitely not in the interest of the state, for example, to let juries know that they have that power. And there's at least some groups going out and trying to inform people about it. So that's some good news. But yeah, we're past the top of the hour. Links will be in the description box following the closeout of this show. And I want to thank all of you for being here again. Another note, if you're interested in becoming a host of Bad Morning News, get a hold of us in Discord or in the comments and let us know. We'd always love to have some more hosts on here. And another announcement, tomorrow is the community episode, which just means that I will read stories posted in the community links section on Discord. So if you have a story you'd like me to cover tomorrow, you can drop some links in there, community links in Discord. With that, have a good day. Bad morning, though, and just all I ask is that you carry the negativity of this morning's news with you throughout the day. But I will see you guys tomorrow. This has been episode 64 of Bad Morning News. Remember to screw the state and fuck the system. Have a bad morning, everybody.